Oh, hi, Kira. Well, welcome everyone to this Let's Connect session on the Universal Code of Conduct and Friendly Space Policies. I'm Lucy from the Let's Connect working group. I've met some of you before, and for some of you, this is the first time, so welcome. I'll be facilitating today with Serene, and we'll be happy to introduce Sandra from Wikimedia Netherlands as our speaker, and Cassie Casares as our tech support and Let's Connect team lead. As Cassie has said, if you're looking for interpretation, we have interpretation available in Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Arabic. You can access that through the menu bar at the bottom of your screen on the same bit as you have share screen reactions and so on. Cassie, could I have the next slide, please? And this is us today, developing and implementing friendly space policies. Next slide, please. So just to let you know a little bit about Let's Connect, for those of you who have not necessarily come to a clinic before, Let's Connect is a peer learning program that's operated as a joint community foundation initiative. We're here to have a good time, to make you feel comfortable and confident in your learning. And we're built on the basis that everyone has something to learn from anyone, no matter the experience. And today that learning is going to be based around the Universal Code of Conduct and friendly space policies. Could I have the next slide, please, Cassie? So today we're going to grow our understanding about the development of Wikimedia Netherlands friendly space policy from the Universal Code of Conduct. We're going to appreciate unique cultural context in which this policy is implemented and its limitations. And we hope to help you become able to implement the framework of a friendly space policy in your own affiliate and working groups. Could I have the next slide, please, Cassie? So our agenda for today, this is our check-in, which will take us up to about 10 minutes after 4 UK time. We will then have an icebreaker led by Serene, after which we're going to move into breakout rooms for some discussion, which will then be fed back to the larger group before handing over to Sandra for her presentation and knowledge share. We'll then have a 5-minute closing where we'll probably ask for some feedback from you and signpost some other resources that might be useful. All of the materials we use today, including recordings of the presentation and multilingual resources, will be shared after the presentation as well. Could I have the next slide, please, Cassie? So I'm going to hand over to Serene for our icebreaker. Before we do so, I just want to say part of the work that we will be doing later in our breakout rooms, you will be invited to select a breakout room based on your level of knowledge of friendly space policies. Now, when you registered for this clinic, you all selected whether you were currently working on a friendly space policy, working with an established friendly space policy, or looking to start learning about and implementing. If you're not sure what you selected, let me know and I will let you know what your answer was so we can make sure you're in the correct group. I'm very happy for you to decide where you are best positioned though. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Serene and I'm going to ask Cassie to stop sharing her screen so that I can share mine and we can take part in the Mentimeter.
Thank you, Lucy, for the lovely introduction. And hello, everyone. I am Serene. If this is your first time joining our learning clinic, we usually like to start our session with an icebreaker exercise where we just work together and get to know about each other more. So I'm going to share a link in the chat. Please, if you can open that link. And I want you to answer a question, which is reflect on an event where you felt safe and welcome. What made it good and how would you describe it? So you can put up to 3 words and then we're going to have it's going to become a word clouds where we see multiple words and then we have a full picture with which reflects the experience of people. So if you could please open that link and let's see. Okay, so already we have someone who wrote friendly. Okay, open to newcomers, respectful, relaxed, no judgment, productive. I agree. That's important. You can also answer in your own language. It doesn't have to be in English. Explicit, friendly space, no judgment. This is the second time. Warmth, respectful, peaceful. Differences are welcomed. That's true. And I think most of wiki events are differences are welcomed in different events. COVID safety, yes, that's very important. Able to be myself. Okay, I can see some responses in the chat. Entertainment and good environment. We're gonna take a couple of minutes just to give space for everyone and time to answer. Diverse, multilingual, kind facilitators. I hope you mean us in this session. Active listening. Okay, so we have 28 responses. Any more responses as well? What made it feel good? And how would you describe it? Maybe as Lucy suggested in the chat, if you have any specific examples, please feel free to share them with us in the chat as well. Nonviolent communication. Any other responses? So I can see Onokwa. I hope I answered your question right. I pronounced your name right. You said, I came to a friend's house and she offered me a chilled drink and made her house relaxing. So I was able to stay with her more than I presumed to stay. Oh, amazing. Feeling welcomed. That's amazing.
Loving these answers.
Right?
Yeah, remember you're welcome to respond in your own languages as well if you would like. But I'm happy to move on and
Yes.
close up the icebreaker if people feel the ice is broken.
I hope so. Thank you everyone for doing this warm-up exercise. And back to you, Lucy.
Excellent. I am going to stop my share and ask if Cassie can share her slides once more. People are sharing drinks and ice cubes in the chat, which is lovely. Hi everyone, just put my camera back on. So this is the bit where we set you up for some breakout room work. So I'm going to try and be as clear and paced as I can be for you. So we have 2 questions that we'd like to discuss. The first question is, what should the purpose of a friendly space policy be? And what is the biggest challenge you see in developing friendly space policy? There should be 4 rooms. The first room is just this room here that we're all in at the moment. If you require interpretation, please stay in this room because the interpreters will be available here for you to use. Those of you who are comfortable moving into other discussion rooms in English primarily, there will be 3 rooms, one for those of you who have an established FSP, one for those of you who are working on it, and one for those of you who have no FSP yet but are looking to develop it. I'm happy for you to decide which room is the best fit for you. Once you are in your rooms, you will have access to a notes document. If one of my colleagues could share a link to that document in the chat. This document has, I'm just going to open it myself as well. This is my my masterpiece of a Google document that I made this morning. I hope you're all just very much impressed by it. It even has tiny emoji flags in it. That is a space for your groups to make notes on what you talk about, what you're comfortable sharing, and for you to refer back to. There are a note of these questions in the document as well for you to refer back to. And the other thing we would suggest is if you could nominate a spokesperson from your group. We will ask for a little bit of feedback to the wider group once we reconvene in about 25 minutes or so. Are these instructions okay? Thumbs up, thumbs down, if anyone would like me to clarify anything again before we open up the breakout rooms. I'm seeing 1 thumbs up, 1 person understands my rambling. Oh, 2, there we go. 3. You are able to send messages from your breakout rooms as well and ask if you would like one of us to come and assist. You'll be in your breakout room for about 20 minutes, which sounds like a long time, but I promise we'll go quickly when you're in discussions. And now the scary bit, I'm actually going to click on breakout rooms and open them. And hopefully this will allow you to select between room 1, which is for those of you working on FSP, room 2, those of you with an established FSP, and room 3 for those of you with no current FSP. If you would like to stay with translation, we will be facilitating discussion in this room as well, if that's more comfortable for you. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to pick the breakout room that best suits where you are at in the discussion you would like to be involved in. If you're finding it hard to join the group you'd like to, you can ask me and I will assign you to the room. Okay, I'm starting to see some movement. Great, we've got people joining the rooms now. Don't be shy. Everyone's very friendly. Thanks, everyone. I think everyone's out of the rooms. Let me just double check. Yep, I think the rooms are all empty now. Wonderful. Cassie, if you'd like to share your slides, I'm going to hand over to Serene for our 15-minute feedback session.
Yes, give me 1 second.
Okay. Amazing. I honestly heard amazing discussions and points. I was in room two, so I was mostly active listener, and it was amazing. So we want to hear your feedback about the two questions that Lucy has included in the document. What should be the purpose of friendly space policy? And what is the biggest challenge you see in developing friendly space policy? So if we can start with room one, if the spokesperson can just open the mic, you have 3 minutes to answer questions, and we want to hear your feedback and maybe share your ideas with everyone here. And then we move on to the second room and third room. So you got 3 minutes. Who's speaking from room one?
It will be me probably. Sorry, I just edited the notes. So hi Clara. We had very nice discussion with like different kind of experiences and point of view, even though we was just 6 people and some shared via chat. So the purpose for us who are in the process of developing of friendly space policy under different terms is mostly inclusion, including the people that don't feel invited. Then part of education, friendly space policy has some basic guidelines, what to do, and ideally to create a respectful environment, and of course to protect everyone who's participating in any level in Wikimedia movement, as well as the burning out prevention, and see as well formed this sharing, or just how to share without being rude. I like this one quite a lot, and how to be yourself with the respect to the others. And Patrick, I think, had like this creating expectations in beforehand. That means creating similar expectancy in advance before I participate anywhere. That's pretty much it for the first question.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you, Clara. Okay, and what about the second question? What is the biggest challenge you see in developing the friend space policy?
Yeah, we are in the process, so we all have lots of
Challenges.
challenges here, so we could go on, but it was mostly, I think, what everyone has in their minds, how to engage everyone in the creating or developing this this policy as like the set of rules, as well how to make like good pool in participation during the creating, because what like the other, I think, part of this is how to work with fighters against new rules. And as we like some of us has this experience, of course, how to with this root smaller root part of community of old white men, if I'm very simplifying here. So this is something we are facing, and how to find an acceptance and trust into this set of rules. And in like this practice part of developing is how to find this trustworthy set of people for the others who could be the one who can who then they can refer if anything happens.
Thank you so much, Lara, for sharing that with us. This is amazing. And thank you for the group who was part of this discussion. Moving on to the second room, who are affiliates with an established friendly space policy. I know Sarah, who's the nominated one, the volunteered, if you can share with us what should be the purpose of friend space policy?
Okay, so we came up with some very similar things to group one. One of the ones that I think is perhaps different. So in the first question, one of the purposes is complying with or aligning with the UCoC, and there was an acknowledgement that there may be funding implications within that. Running inclusive events, implications for diversity, and to ensure that you have an actually friendly space for people who aren't white men, aren't old white men, just to come back to what group one had said there. It sets the tone for the type of space that is intended by the organisers, can be explicit about what kinds of behaviours are and are not acceptable. For example, setting out what it is that harassment looks like. A really good point was made that conflict is likely always going to be part of a space, and therefore having somebody who is responsible for dealing with or facilitating that prevents it, hopefully, from going outside that space. Another really good point that was made of working with partner organisations is that sometimes having an explicit policy in place can make it easier for those organisations to work with you when they know that your policies will align with theirs. I've made a further note. It was that maybe this next one isn't actually an explicit purpose, but it is a side effect, is that it can exclude those through self-selection who might make for an unfriendly space. And also, in a slightly friendlier note, making behaviours and expectations explicit for those who have challenges around social norms or codes. So removing assumptions or reducing the number of assumptions which have to be made. And shall I move on to the second one?
Yes, please.
So one of the challenges that we saw in developing friendly space policies was that actually many conflicts were observed to be between white men. So seeing it as that more, perhaps sometimes more than it being a diversity issue, using air quotes on that. Easier to enforce or to police, we thought, in-person events where you are able to read body language and facial expressions, perhaps easier. So it's harder to check in on people in online spaces. We had a good discussion around what the extent of the policy is to what parts of an event does a policy still apply. So there is a grey area perhaps around when duty of care extends. So for an example, if you have a social event in, say, a space that serves alcohol after an in-person event, and that there is a grey area in that, and maybe a lack of clarity over where that duty of care extends. Really good point being made about enforcement conferring authority and the ability to exclude people, and how do we use that authority responsibly. I spelled that incorrectly, I almost said that. We had a good discussion, also mentions of restorative approach and how it is that once somebody has been someone's behaviour has fallen short under a friendly space policy, what are the pathways for behaviour after that? What would we expect from people? This then led on to a good conversation about whether or not we would need examples or a guide to particular situations. We also wanted to acknowledge the emotional labour that goes into being the person that is responsible for enforcement. We were a little worried about policies being or becoming weaponized by bad actors, and also noting whether or not a practice, having a practice to revise and update those policies as things evolve or as the organisation learns. So having a regular update within that. And I think that is everything.
Thank you, Sarah, so much. Thank you. If we can move on to group 3, affiliates with no current friendly space policy, if you can share with us your feedback and answers.
Yeah, I think I can make it. My name is Pilar. I'm from Wikimedia Spain, and we are currently thinking to how to apply how to implement this friendly space policy. I'm quite new in the movement, and for me it was difficult to understand what is necessary to have a friendly space policy, because when I read it, I find it's something very obvious for me. So I'm going to answer first the question. The purpose, I think, is to be able to feel safe, to respect each other, privacy, policy, and it's necessary to adapt this to events. But when I ask myself the second question, the biggest challenge you see in developing this friendly space policy, I found that in our community, obviously there is cases always, but since I joined here, I never find something really clear to apply the friendly space. But my question here, my point is that it's very difficult to detect this microaggression, bad manners, this kind of conduct that for me is difficult to monitor, and this is for me or what I think is probably the biggest challenge, because we have in control the serious things like harassment or racism, but the problem here is sometimes the humor sense, how you make feel others, these kind of micro things that are currently happening, how make some guidelines or how to control this kind of behaviors. And I think this is something is considering, because when you are in a situation and come to the friendly space policy to read it, you can't find a solution, because there are for really obvious things, but I think there are micro small things that probably is something we probably need to start, because when a problem scale is when people start. But if you start to control, or to not control, obviously maybe it's not the word, but to teach or to how to learn. I hear a lot in this movement the word toxic, but I think sometimes it's not only toxic, it's poor social skills or things like, like you can start with things like that. And I don't know, I think this is the challenge sometimes, how to monitor, how to take care of these kind of situations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that with us. That was amazing and very insightful as well. Now I'm gonna give the mic to Sandra, if Cassie can share the screen with us again. And Sandra is gonna present to us the process of creating a friendly space policy at Wikimedia Netherlands. So thank you everyone for sharing again. And Sandra, the floor is yours.
Yes, give me 1 second, Sandra. I'll present right now.
Okay, no worries.
The really big build up, Sandra. You're like Beyonce.
Yeah, I
Lots
would
of
like
support
a
acts.
drum roll sort of in the
Yeah.
background. That would be nice.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
lovely. Okay, Sandra, the floor is yours.
Okay, could you bring up the first slide, please? Well, and perhaps let's go immediately to the second slide. Okay, well, thanks for joining this session, this presentation. Wikimedia Netherlands introduced a new friendly space policy actually April the 1st this year, after a big phase and long phase of development. And I want to share our experiences a bit. So why did we do this? How did we do it? And actually, what did we develop? What is our friendly space policy? This slot of my presentation is maybe the the more boring bits, because it's very much on the policy and the process. After that, I'm going to also go into the whole what we are learning now that we're actually implementing the friendly space policy, and sort of the realization that by being the owner of a friendly space policy, you also become sort of the judge and the mediator in your community, which is sort of a staggering realization for us. Next slide, please. More information. We have our own wiki, the Wikimedia Netherlands wiki has lots of information on the friendly space policy in Dutch and English, including on how we developed it. And there's also information on Meta, so you can also read up on that. Next slide, thank you. To introduce Wikimedia Netherlands, I'm a bit disappointed with the color of the heading. That's actually beautiful bright orange on my slide, but our national color. We are a chapter, an affiliate. We serve the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which means both the part in Europe and the part in the Caribbean. There are 6 islands in the Caribbean which are part of the Kingdom, and we are also trying to work for them. We have about 175 members, but we work, everything we do is for members and non-members alike. We don't make any distinction. Founded in 2006, which makes us one of the older chapters, and we have an office and staff since 2012. At the moment, we're 4 FTE, that's 5 people. We develop or support or are involved with approximately 40 activities per year. That's online and in person. And in total, they have about 1,800 participants. We do this because we have 40 active volunteers. That's why we're able to do all of this. And we have 35 established partnerships in the GLAM sector and education. So that's us. And next slide, please. And a couple of years ago, we decided that we needed a new friendly space policy. We had one, but it was very limited, and it only dealt with the issue of real overt discrimination, and it only allowed for one measure to be taken, that is removing someone from the event. At the same time, there was a discussion within the movement about including the previously excluded groups, and sort of more realization that Wikimedia spaces are not by default friendly. We also, at that point, we realized that we needed a policy that worked for in-person events as well as online. And we also, this was really strange, we realized that there was a lot of confusion within the chapter what actually was a friendly space violation. Sort of officially as an organization, as a chapter, an office and a board, we were not aware of that many friendly space violations, which means that nobody had reported anything formally to us. But when talking to community members, they did say, yeah, but this happened, and that was sort of very unpleasant. So we realized there might be more going on below the surface than we thought. And also the Universal Code of Conduct came into force, and sort of personal disclaimer here, I was on the drafting committee of the Universal Code of Conduct. So I had this put your money where your mouth is feeling, and thought, well, we have this code of conduct, we have this text. Let's see if we can develop a friendly space policy for Wikimedia Netherlands. So we started. Next slide, please. What we actually set out to do is we wanted a clear document, not too long, very concise. We also wanted it to be practical with good guidelines for how you actually enforce this, should apply to online and in-person meetings, and be sort of compliant with the UCoC. What we at this point sort of did not realize that if you want a document which has guidelines for reporting, enforcement and appeal processes, no way is it going to be short. So that's we found that out as we started writing. Next slide, please. What we also wanted, we wanted a positive document. We didn't want something just to say, this is wrong, and if you do this, you will never set foot in Wikimedia Netherlands again. We wanted it also to indicate what kind of behavior we felt would be desirable. And we also wanted it to be flexible so that we could sort of look at the situations that occurred and really look at what is going to work best as a measure for this situation. Next slide, please. Then we set up, or our board actually set up a working group. One board member volunteered for that. 3 community members in the end volunteered. We were very lucky with these community members who were very experienced in the projects and within Wikimedia Netherlands. And there was also one ED who joined, not necessarily volunteered, but I was part of the working group anyway. This was quite a huge task which they did, and I have the utmost respect for this group because they met every 3 weeks. Next slide, please. For a long, long time, they met every 3 weeks. The group was established 2020, 18th of March, and we finalized the job 1st of April. So that was 3 years. I have to say that, okay, we started on 18th of March 2020. In the same week, the Netherlands went into lockdown. It was when the pandemic started. So the working conditions were not ideal. We could never meet in person for the best part of our operations. And in the middle, there was a year when the office was hugely understaffed through illness and vacancy. So it took us a while, but next slide, please. In the end, all the effort sort of had a result. We produced 2 volumes of Friendly Space Policy for Wikimedia Netherlands. We had the actual main text, which is basically the rules, looks very much like the main text of the Code of Conduct. And we had the protocol, which just indicates, well, how can you report? How do you appeal a decision, which is considerably longer than the text itself. Next slide, please. And how did we do this? What was our process? Well, I call it here draft, consult, revise, and then repeat the whole thing. The basis was the Universal Code of Conduct. We looked at the text in Dutch and we started sort of crossing out the things where we thought this is not that relevant for an affiliate, for a chapter. And then we started penciling in the things where we thought, well, this is missing and this is very relevant for a chapter. And that was our first draft. And then that was the first consultation round, and there came feedback and we made a second draft and there was a consultation round. It was very much a process of the working group drafts, and then the result is presented to the community and the community can give feedback. And that went all the way up to and including the final text. Next slide, please. Well, what is our friendly space policy? What is it not? One thing which really sort of helped me in my thinking about it is that the friendly space policy is there to achieve or restore a safe environment for all participants. It's not there to punish people who have offended. That's not its main purpose. Also, this was actually feedback from the community. In our first draft, we talked about sanctions when someone did something that was not sort of what was undesirable conduct. And one of our members, and I'm eternally grateful to him for this, said, no, they're not sanctions, they're measures. You're not sanctioning a person, you're taking measures to restore the safe environment. And also, it's a code of conduct. It's not a law. And that sort of realizing that allowed us to be more flexible in drafting it and thinking about it. Next slide, please. Well, who does it apply to, the friendly space policy? Well, it applies to everyone, particularly also including the staff and the board of Wikimedia Netherlands. They're actually held to higher standards. And it applies everywhere, in every event we organize or every platform or online channel we are responsible for, that means that the friendly space policy applies. And if you want to participate in an event or participate on a platform, you have to at one point sort of check the box saying that you agree to the friendly space policy. Immediately, that sort of raises the issue, what do you do about partnership events where you're maybe even organizing something in the premises of a partner who has their own rules? I'll come back to that a bit later, but basically that means that there are graduations in the extent to which the friendly space policy can apply to an event Wikimedia Netherlands is involved in. Next slide, please. What is in it? Well, it explains desirable behavior, unacceptable behavior. It says how you can report undesirable behavior, what Wikimedia Netherlands will do or has to do when a report comes in, what measures are possible, and how someone can appeal to a decision. I think that was from the beginning. We said we have to have an appeal process because that's the only thing the only way this thing can be sort of just. I also think that these bullet points are sort of the backbone of any friendly space policy. I mean, we went sort of for the whole thing. It's a huge policy actually, but even if you have a very small limited policy, it will probably have these elements in it. Next slide, please. Okay, we explained desirable behavior. This is straight from the Universal Code of Conduct. That Universal Code of Conduct is pretty clear about that, so we just sort of applied that to Wikimedia Netherlands. Next slide, please. Same applies to the unacceptable behavior. This is sort of a list of the whole misery people can inflict on each other during in-person events or particularly online. It's all specified in the Code of Conduct. The only thing we actually added was point C, obstructing constructive progress, which means that people just keep coming back to issues which have been sort of dealt with a long time ago, which is not specifically in the Code of Conduct, but which is something we at Wikimedia Netherlands sort of encountered. It was a real problem for us, so we included that. Next slide, please. Also, in the friendly space policy, how do you report an incident? And our aim there was to make it as easy as possible, to have a very low threshold for reporting a friendly space incident. You can report that any way you want to. You can go up to a Wikimedia Netherlands board member or staff member or the friendly space contact person during an event and say that something has happened. You can write, you can, well, phone in, any way you like, you can report. We do have a standard form, but it's not compulsory. We just want people to sort of have as little obstacle to reporting as possible. Who can report? Well, obviously, if you yourself were sort of were made to feel uncomfortable, you can report that. But you can also report that if you witness something where you think this is just not okay. The only thing that's not possible is to report anonymously. We won't sort of process those. And you can report during an event or later. It doesn't matter. So low threshold procedures here. Next slide, please. What also in the FSP, and a very important part, is what can we do to restore the friendly space or protect the friendly space? Well, it starts with just a warning. You can go up to someone and say, look, we hear this and this happened. This is really not on. Please don't do that again. Up to and including reporting something to the police, which we have actually done in the past, and suspending someone from the Wikimedia Netherlands membership. And there is a whole range of things in between. Next slide, please. there are a couple of things when we were drafting, we realized that this was going to be controversial in our community. One thing is that the friendly space policy allows us to take measures before anything has happened. If we have reason to assume that somebody is going to attend an event and cause problems or somehow be problematic, we can sort of approach them even before the event, say, please, these are our rules, stick to them. We can even say, we prefer it if you wouldn't show up. And what we also included was that we included a clause that if you are blocked on a Wikimedia project, such as Wikipedia or Commons or Wikidata, that automatically means that you can't attend our events unless the board gives you an exemption. There is a sort of clause to get out of that. And there was a lot of discussion about that in the working group. There was a lot of discussion about that when we sort of asked feedback from the community. There was discussion in the board, but in the end we kept it in, and now that we're implementing it, there's still a lot of discussion about this, but I still think it was the good thing to do. Next slide, please. This is actually, okay, you have the measures, but who can impose them? There is a sort of a difference. The giving a warning or asking someone to leave a specific event, that happens basically during an event. So that is the contact person, the designated friendly space contact person, or the executive director or a board member can impose those measures immediately. Anything more permanent or more radical, it is a board decision, and suspending someone from as a member, that is the board and the General Assembly. So there is sort of a graduation in responsibility, who can do what. Next slide, please. Okay, appeal process. Almost all measures can be appealed once. We were very much aware, so we know the nature of the Wikipedia community, that there are some members in the community who could go on appealing forever, and then even a little bit longer, just because they like this sort of process. So we do restrict it. If I take a measure somebody doesn't like, they can appeal to the board. If the board takes a measure, they can appeal to the General Assembly Committee on Friendly Space. And I assume that in the end, they could appeal to Trust and Safety at the Wikimedia Foundation, or they could take us to court. But within Wikimedia Netherlands, it's sort of fairly limited. Anyone can appeal. It's not just the person who is sort of sanctioned or who has a measure imposed on them. Also, the people who were affected and who feel that what we have decided to do is not adequate. So, appeal process brought in. Next slide. One thing which we feel that is very important is that's also sort of in line of, we don't impose sanctions, we have measures, and the whole purpose is to have a safe and pleasant working environment for people. That we do want to help people who are somehow involved in a friendly space incident or a violation. That is the people who are sort of hurt by it, but also the people who are sort of I hate the word perpetrator, but sort of the people who were found to have acted in a way we did not approve of. So we want to actually to reach out to everyone and help them to get to a situation where they can move on, whether it's possible, where it becomes possible for everyone to take part in events again. This is something I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about implementation, but this is extremely tricky, because then you're also talking about sort of forgiveness and moving on, and that's not everybody is always able and willing to do that, but it is part of our friendly space policy. Next slide. This is actually the last slide of this section. We did this process. We worked in it for 3 years. We have now implemented our new friendly space policy. So is it better? Is it just bigger, or is it just more bureaucracy? It's undoubtedly a lot bigger. Our old friendly space policy was not even 400 words. We're now over 5,000. It's not more bureaucracy, at least I don't think so. I think a lot of the measures and a lot of the things, so things like appointing a friendly space contact person for every event, we did that before we had this policy. We did impose measures before we had this friendly space policy. And in fact, the one time we did go to the police to report something, that was before this friendly space policy was in place. So we wrote it down, which I think is not more bureaucracy, it's more transparency for everyone involved. And transparency needs a lot of words. Looking back now, I tend to think if I had known how much work it was going to be to develop this friendly space policy, I might not have started the process. But now that we've done it, I'm very glad that we did. We have one very persistent and troublesome sort of friendly space issue. And the fact that we now have written it down, what our rules are and how we deal with these issues, makes it easier for everyone involved. It is clear sort of what the boundaries are. So big investments, still not perfect. We're noting down things to improve because we will have a sort of formal review next year. But glad we did it. Thank you. I'm complete for this section.
Thank you, Sandra. And to everyone in the chat, apologies, I did share the slides in every language, but the permissions were not there. So a few of you clicked on the links and then were immediately locked out. So that wasn't very friendly. Apologies. They are now all open. Now we have I think we've got about 6 or 7 minutes to ask some questions to Sandra. For context, the second part of Sandra's presentation will be about challenges faced in implementing the policy. If anyone has a particular question they'd like to ask right now, please do raise your hand or put your question in the chat. While we're waiting for that, I wanted to ask Sandra, you mentioned that you don't accept anonymous reporting. Can I ask a little bit more about that? Is that to prevent... well, yeah, I would just love to know why.
Yeah, that was one of the big discussion points. Should we or shouldn't we? In the end, we felt that the chance that we would be sort of drawn into conflicts or vendettas or really sort of personal issues between volunteers would just be too, the risk would be too high. So that's why we, in the end, decided, no, we're not going to include this. This is actually one of the few issues where the board, who had to improve the policy in the end, intervened in the text, because in the text we had put before them, anonymous reporting was still allowed, and the board said, no, we don't want to do this. Which basically means that I'm still in two minds about this, because I also was part of the group that forwarded this text with the anonymous reporting in it. I think in practice, if we would get an anonymous report, we would not go into the whole process of investigating, but of course, you read it and you know, so it's still there somewhere.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sandra. It was really interesting to hear about that. On mic in the queue, I see Clara from Wikimedia Czechia. Clara, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I will see Sandra about it in a week, so I didn't want to take that much time. I have 3 main questions from the top of my head now, so you can choose maybe which one may be the most beneficial maybe for the audience. One was, I was thinking about like because it was 3.5 years to create all of this. And you described the team or like the working group. So I was thinking about like if the rest of the community participated, or how did you ensure that all of this that you are creating will be accepted by and in your community? That's one of the question. The second one, you said that you even like before had the experiences with the like I don't know how to call this, like the teams or the council for each event. So how did you train these people? If you had some previous experience, or you use some Wikimedia Foundation trainings, or you create your own. And the last one is, you said that you will review these documents next year. So how this will look like? What's your plan about this? So these are the three questions. I don't know if we have time for this.
Okay, about the involvement of the community. We publish sort of every draft on our wiki. We have the Wikimedia Netherlands wiki for review and comments, and the community sort of got involved. Of course, it's not the entire community, but there are also a couple of people who are more into topics like this than others. But there was good feedback, and even people who really read every word, every comma, and made really excellent comments, which improved our drafts no end. And even some people who are actually not that active in Wikimedia Netherlands as volunteers, but were Wikipedians, and were sort of, there was also, people were a bit sort of scared of the whole universal code of conduct in the Wikimedia community. So they were sort of very curious how it would play out, what the practical implications would be. So even Wikipedians joined in the discussion on our wiki. That, yeah, I think that was a very good investment of time. And we also, every time we had a round of comments, we would report back on whether or not we had integrated the comments in the next draft. So, and also explain why not in certain cases. And I think that sort of increased sort of support for the whole thing. Sorry. No, can I sort of answer Clara's other questions?
Yes, absolutely, of course. Sorry, I was too enthusiastic there. Go ahead.
As to the people who, even before we had the friendly space policy, were sort of the coordinators, that was just on a basis of people who volunteered to do this. Usually there were people who had, from their working life or from their the professional background, had some experience in dealing with groups and dealing with people. And now that we have this policy in place, we're also sort of organizing training sessions. We have also set up a sort of a Telegram group, which is sort of the I need help group. If you are a friendly space contact person and something happens, you want some feedback, you can reach out there. We sort of have small grants if people want to do some external training or capacity building. So we are investing in this. And the last question was, our review. Yeah. At the moment, we are writing down, we actually have a Google Doc where we write down things as they happen to us, or as we see, oh, this is not clear. How should we do this? And then we are writing them down for the review process. And I really expect that there will be some changes. I also hope that perhaps we can make it a little shorter, because we realize some things don't have to be written out completely. They will sort of are clear by themselves.
That's brilliant, Sandra. You've taken us perfectly to the start of the second part. However, I note that we do have a question from Onwuka asking if there are some projects that relate to friendly space policy that one can carry out so as to educate your community. I don't want to speak for you, Sandra, but I wonder, is this something you'll cover towards the end of your presentation?
Yeah, I do have some suggestions on what you could do, but
brilliant. Okay, well,
yeah.
What we'll do is we'll wait on that question on. We can look at Sandra's suggestions, and then we can always follow up if you like. So I will pass back to Sandra for the second part of this presentation, and thank you all for your questions.
Okay, the second part is more about, we wrote the policy. We took a few moments to recover and congratulate ourselves, and then started implementing it. So could I have the next slide, please? Just to give an idea of how often something happens, because we have this huge policy, so you could get the impression that Wikimedia Netherlands events are sort of riddled with friendly space violations. No, luckily they are not. We report about them every year. We had sort of 6 issues in 2021 when the new policy was not even in place. And we had 3 issues last year. And that can even be that somebody said, look, this is strange, did something. At one point we had a situation, we had an online event, we were still in lockdown, and somebody got the impression that a person who is actually globally blocked by WMF had attended this event, which is not supposed to happen. So we actually looked into that, and that is listed here as suspicion that there had been an FSP violation, but it turned out there hadn't been one. So it doesn't even mean that something bad happened. It just means that someone reported something to us and we looked into it. So far, luckily, not too many incidents. Next slide, please. What we sort of are worried about now that we're implementing and learning things is, well, there is this question, actually call it jurisdiction. Where can Wikimedia Netherlands sort of apply rules? Where are our rules valid? And one thing is sort of the role of partners. We have a lot of partners, and often they are the hosts to our events. And yeah, but for example, one of our partners is the National Archives. That's a government institution, and our events are in their, we'll call it their foyer, sort of where before you even enter their real offices, they have this open space. Yeah, it's a government building. It's a public space, and people we have blocked on for Wikimedia Netherlands events, usually because they're blocked on Wikipedia, technically they shouldn't attend our events, but there's no way you can throw someone out of a government building because he's been blocked on Wikipedia. That's not how it works, and I'm really glad that it doesn't work like that. So we are a bit flexible. The friendly space policy applies in full when we organize an event, and it's either at our office or it's in a space we have rented. Then we are completely in charge. Any other scenario, the friendly space policy is not completely valid, and we try to make that clear beforehand. We have some partners who have adopted our friendly space policy, who have said, okay, if you decide to ban someone, we accept that this is necessary, and he or they will also not be welcome at our events. But it's a very tricky situation, causes endless trouble. I'm speaking from experience here. We have one case in where this is really an issue. So you have a friendly space policy, but that doesn't mean everything is clear. And that also applies to, for example, the fact that we say if you are blocked on a Wikimedia project at the moment, any Wikimedia project, you are not allowed to take part in our events unless the board says that, okay, you can join. That's also already a bit strange, because something happened way far removed from a Wikimedia Netherlands events. We're not involved, it may not affect us, but we do say, okay, you can't come. Yeah, I think we're probably going to change that a bit when we review. And if you're blocked on the Dutch language Wikipedia, the English language Wikipedia, or Wikidata or Wikimedia Commons, then you're automatically also blocked from Wikimedia Netherlands events. All other blocks we probably will put up for discussion. I can imagine that we're going to make those rules a bit more flexible. That's also, yeah, the question of jurisdiction. What is a jurisdiction if you're working in an internet-based global movement? where are you responsible, where are you not responsible. Next slide, please. Well, this is also something we worried about when we were drafting the friendly space policy, and we worry a little less about it now, but still. We all know that within Wikimedia communities, there can be long-running feuds and conflicts and people who have been hating each other for years. And how do we avoid that they're going to use our friendly space policy as a sort of a weapon to fight their enemy? So far, we've managed to avoid that. One thing is that we have pretty good contacts within the project communities. So we are reasonably aware of what is going on, or otherwise we know people who would tell us what is going on, so that we can sort of avoid situations like that happening. Also, we have made making a bad faith report a violation of the friendly space policy. So if somebody reports a friendly space policy violation, and actually it's all sort of fake, it's just to harm someone they don't like, we will, and we find that out, we will actually treat that as a friendly space violation in itself. So do that and you can end up being sort of sanctioned yourself. Nevertheless, what we are realizing is that if you are the owner of a friendly space policy, and we are, as the affiliate, we are the owner, you automatically move into the position where you are sort of, you become a judge or a mediator in community conflicts. And that is a very tricky position. We accept that that is the case, but it is something which we are very careful how we deal with that, and we do try to get good information on actually what is going on in the community, what the backgrounds of certain conflicts are. But this is extremely tricky and also extremely time consuming if you get caught in sort of community conflicts. Next slide, please. Well, one thing we still worry about, is never-ending appeals. Yeah, appeals are never ending. Even if we have limited the times you can appeal, it sort of does not stop people from thinking of new reasons why they should appeal to something else. So if you are unfortunate enough to come across a community member who really likes this sort of semi-legal appealing business, yeah, it's going to be a long process, and it will take a lot of time, and it will probably be never ending because people can just continue sending you emails and objecting and sending, involving everyone in their issues. This is something, we have to live with it. No, there's no, as we see it, there's no really clear and definite solution to that. Another issue, next slide, please. This is really the core issue of implementing a friendly space policy, deciding whether actually there was a violation. This is always tricky, because there may have been an incident, someone said something that's really hurtful, but was not aware that this could be hurtful. Yeah, is it then still a violation? Probably yes. On the other hand, someone can be very hurt or feels very uncomfortable about something that was said or done. Does that automatically mean that there was a friendly space violation? No, not automatically. Could be, yeah. The whole thing, deciding what is a violation is very subjective. It's subjective to the people who are involved. It's also subjective for the people who have to sort of judge this, so the people implementing the friendly space policy, because we all have our ideas and preconceptions and a cultural background. So we come with a set of fixed ideas about what is offensive behavior and what is good behavior. And it's important at least to be aware of that. To also, we recommend that if you have to make some sort of judgment on a situation, always discuss it with someone else. Get feedback, get a second pair of eyes on that. But this is really the most difficult issue of the whole friendly space policy. Next slide, please. Yeah, it's never just about Wikipedia. And I years ago, I trained as a mediator, and one of the important conflict areas in society in general is conflicts between neighbors. That is a huge thing. And we had a saying, it's never just about the dog, because often it was said, yeah, the dog barks, or the dog digs up my lawn, or the dog does whatever. But there was always something else, because if two people are able to communicate reasonably, they will resolve the issue about the dog. It's never just about the dog. Conflicts within Wikipedia environment, it's never just about Wikipedia. There is always something else, otherwise the conflict would have been resolved. It wouldn't escalate to a level where you as an affiliate have to become involved. Sort of, in my experience in the Wikimedia community, the things that are there are usually part of a conflict situation. There's gender. We know that female Wikipedians tend to be more negative about the working climate than male Wikipedians. That can be an issue in conflicts. It often is. We have the issue neurodiverse, neurotypical. We know that 15% of the Dutch Wikipedia community self-identify as being on the autistic spectrum or having autistic spectrum disorder. That has consequences. It has consequences for everyone, both for the people, for the neurodiverse part of the community and for the neurotypical community, because the interaction is not always as good as it should be, and there is a whole huge potential for misunderstanding. We have age, generational issues, young people, older people having different ways how to discuss, how to deal with conflicts. That's always, or can be, part of it. Ethnic and religious issues, which can play a role in what's considered acceptable behavior and non-acceptable behavior. We also, that's really something only we have the Dutch-Belgian issue. On the Dutch language Wikipedia, 2/3 of the editors are Dutch, 1/3 are Belgian Flemish, and there is a cultural difference. In general, the Belgians are more polite. So that also leads to issues and conflicts. And then there's the issue about Wikimedia and the outside world, which is something we sort of, as an affiliate, sort of come across, that sometimes some Wikipedians have a rather, they tend to think that the way things are done on Wikimedia, the conventions and the rules of Wikimedia projects also have validity in the outside world, which I'm afraid to say, or happy to say, they don't. But that, especially for an affiliate where you partly work in the outside world, you are a legal entity, you have to abide with certain laws and regulations, and partly within the Wikimedia community, this is also an issue which can make it tricky. Yeah, as I said, if you have a friendly space policy, if as an affiliate you decide you're going to develop one, be prepared to also take on this role of judge and mediator, and prepare for it. Get the training in place, get good volunteers in place, prepare yourself to start dealing with issues like this, because they're challenging. It's also quite rewarding if you get them right, but they're also time consuming and just tricky. Thank you. I'm complete for this section.
Thank you, Sandra, so much. I think now we can just give some space to people to ask. If you have any questions, you can either raise your hand, we can give you space to ask Sandra, or you can put your question in the chat. Do we have any questions or someone wants to share any? Yes, Maria.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much, Sandra. It was really a pleasure listening to you and seeing such a policy so elaborated and thought through. I'm from Wikimedia Germany, and we had a policy which kind of was stopped because there have been some issues on a big event on a WikiCon, where we found out that our friendly space policy had a major lack, which was what about when the friendly policy team or the ones that execute the rules break the rules themselves.
Ooh.
And this was a really, really bad and tricky situation. So this is why the whole team stopped working, and the friendly policy is not in charge at the moment. So I'm new to take over that role and to re-implement a new version of the friendly space policy. And I'm also a trained mediator. And I find this so tricky, you know, coming in and being a mediator, having a certain view on conflicts, and now being faced with a situation where I would also have to be the judge. And I feel very uncomfortable with this role. I feel better with the mediator role. And I still don't have a real solution how to deal with it. So I'm just curious, how do you deal with it within your team? So do you have the mediator and the judge in your team, or are you both in one person, or do you try to avoid both roles, or how do you deal with sanctions, for example?
The way we do it, we have these friendly space coordinators for specific events or specific channels or platforms. They are initially, they will have more of a mediation role, because they will, if they see a conflict arising, try to prevent escalation. But still, if it's already escalated, they will also have to sort of make a decision.
Mm.
Sometimes mediation doesn't work, and sometimes you just have to say, okay, I'm very sorry, but you will have to leave this event now. But we do try to have the really hard and harsh and tough decisions either taken by me or by the board.
Mm.
The problem, of course, is that we're such a small unit. I mean, we have 5 staff, so occasionally I'm also the friendly space contact person because there's nobody else at the event. So I think at Wikimedia Deutschland you have more chance for a proper division of labor.
We do, definitely.
Yeah. But, and what we, something I didn't mention is that we are also going to introduce something like an ombudsperson, someone who is entirely from outside the community and outside Wikimedia Netherlands, who's a trained sort of mediator, ombudsperson, who can sort of step in or can be involved if things really get stuck. Because with these roles being so intertwined, you can easily get stuck.
Thank you so much. So it would be really helpful to just design different roles for different situations. And
yeah, although there will always be a situation where, unfortunately, it did not really work out. No, that's,
okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miriam. I think, Sarah, you can go next, and then we have Stuart as well.
Hi there. Yeah, thanks for that. It's been really, really interesting. You mentioned about getting good volunteers in place and good training, and I wondered what kind of training you'd put in place or would recommend.
The first training we did was when we introduced the policy. Was something we sort of organized that ourselves. It was to introduce the new policy. But we asked people to, the volunteers who would be most involved with, oh yeah, no, sorry, all the images on my screen suddenly moved and I thought, oh God, Sarah, come on. But you're still here. We invited all the people who volunteered as friendly space contact persons. We also asked them to contribute, to suggest what is most troublesome, what are you most worried about, and we dealt with issues like that. We also suggested some online training which they could do. We actually have our own online training for, it's a sort of e-learning module for online cooperation, which we sort of require everyone to do. And our next step is develop a proper manual and a proper training program. And we would be very interested in joining forces with other chapters and affiliates with this, since we are all facing these issues together. So.
Thank you. I think Stuart, you can go next.
Thank you. Yeah, Sandra, it occurs to me, like, I'm wondering about how you think the kind of history of the chapter and how, I mean, I don't know how long Wikimedia Netherlands has been going, but it's one of the older chapters, much like Wikimedia UK. And I'm wondering how much the kind of history of the chapter and your kind of sort of like long-term trustees, volunteers, and so forth have influenced this policy. Like, it feels like case law has been built up over time. And I say this because I kind of feel that with Wikimedia UK's history and with various kind of things trustees have done on the projects and off the projects over the years, in the dim and distant past now, have probably affected the way we hold meetings and affected the way we built a code of conduct. So I don't know whether you can speak to anything about the maturity of the organization and the relatively long history helping develop policy.
Yeah, it's both a help and a hindrance, I think, the long history. Of the 3 volunteers who were in the working group that drafted the friendly space policy, 2 were actually board members when I joined, and that was in 2012. So though these are very experienced, but and 2 were admins on Dutch language Wikipedia or on Wikimedia Commons. So these people are very much integrated into the Wikimedia community. That helps because they've got loads of experience and also some standing in the community, which gave the policy we were drafting credibility. Also, yeah, it's not the way to bring in a totally new approach. I think we tried, this was compensated to a large extent because we actually used the friendly space policy, the Universal Code of Conduct, as the basis. Really, the text of the Universal Code of Conduct was our basis. And that was really drafted in by a very diverse group, went in for global consultation. So I think that sort of provided a wider basis than we would have had if we had drafted ourselves from scratch.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. I mean, it's a big subject, but thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sandra, Stuart, Sarah, everyone who's asked questions. We have one other question from, I'm so sorry, my screen has just gone. There we go, from Onwuka, but I think that Onwuka's question will be answered by Sandra's next section. Now, I'm conscious we have 5 minutes left in our allotted time. What I would suggest is if you are able to stick around till, I would say we'll be done by about 5 past the hour, please do. If you need to leave bang on the hour, that's completely fine. The slides will be available for you to see after the session as well. But Sandra, if you want to very quickly go through your last suggestion of how to implement, so if you could just solve the friendly space policy right now in 5 minutes or less, that would be excellent.
No
And
problem
hopefully
whatsoever.
on Wika's question was about, sorry, I'm scrolling back up through the chat here. It was about suggestions of things you could do in the community. So I'm hoping that this will address that. So fingers crossed. Sandra, off you go. And like I say, we will probably run a little over, and I understand some people may need to leave, but we thank you for your patience. Well, we might need the slides, Cassie, sorry.
Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, quickly, how to make a localized friendly space policy? Well, first, try to determine how much friendly space policy you need. What kind of activities do you organize? How many activities do you organize? What kind of problems do you experience? You don't have to do what we did, sort of write the whole thing. Always use the Universal Code of Conduct as the basis. Actually, if you have that, translate it into your local language if it hasn't been translated yet. That is already a lot of your work done. And then check what is in there that we don't need and what is not in there, what we do need. Also looking at your local law, at your cost, at the customs of your affiliate, and the customs and conventions on the Wikimedia projects you work closely with. Next slide, please. Involve the community. Actually, from the start, even from before the start, when you start thinking perhaps we should have a friendly space policy, already discuss that question with your community, get their feedback, and keep asking for feedback and report back on how you use the feedback. That takes a lot of time, but that was a good investment we found. Next slide, please. Well, what we developed, it's a very Dutch thing, which means it's long, it's a bit legal formal, because that is the way we tend to do things in the Netherlands. It is also sometimes a bit blunt, because that is the way we tend to do things in the Netherlands. And it's based on the assumption, which is also cultural, that people will speak up for themselves, that you have a fairly egalitarian group, and that in principle, if there's something wrong, someone will speak up. And that's cultural. There are also, I'm aware that in other cultures, this is not the way you're supposed to do this, that this is not polite to complain about things. So then you have to have a different, perhaps not a different policy, but a different way of implementing it. Next slide, please. Yeah, we can I won't go into this in detail, but look, we have this policy of 5,000 words or whatever. If I have to present the friendly space policy at an event, we have a friendly space policy, this is what I say. This is the heart of it. So, and you can make this much longer, much shorter, but this is sort of the core message about friendly space, which we give. Next slide, please. If you start developing and implementing your own friendly space policy, I called this have faith, have confidence, trust in yourself, and be realistic. Don't attempt to draft something which includes all the possible scenarios you may run into in friendly space implementation, because it's impossible. The scenarios are endless. Also realize that there will be no standard recipe, so don't try to draft all these recipes. Just have a few good ingredients, and that will work in most cases. Above all, sort of trust in your own common sense, in your social skills, in your wiki intelligence, in understanding this community, and trust that your friendly space volunteers or contact persons also have this common sense, so that when you are faced with a situation, you will probably take the right decision because you have the knowledge and the skills to do that. Also, accept that you will not be able to make everyone happy. Since we have a friendly space policy, there are some people who will never send me a Christmas card again. But yeah, that's just the way it is, I'm afraid. Next slide, please. This actually was a question, sort of, what would I say are the 3 first steps to take if you want to start developing a friendly space policy? Well, 1, find at least 3 people who are willing to become part of this process. Find 3 good people who will help draft it and also willing to defend it to the community. And when you have the policy, will also probably are happy to play a role in its implementation. Also, important step 2, translate the Universal Code of Conduct into your local language. That is very important. And what I would do next is, if I have these 3 good people and I have the translated text, I would organize an event where people can sort of look at the text of the Code of Conduct and say, okay, we need this. I like this. This is perhaps not so relevant for us. I miss this. And then after that, you will have your first draft of a friendly space policy, or at least you will have enough to draft something which is the 10 rules for safe space at our affiliate. And you can build for that. You don't have to do what Wikimedia Netherlands did, which build the whole thing in one go and take 3 years. You can do that in phases. And probably if I had to do it again, I would do it in phases. So these would be my suggestions if you want to start drafting a friendly space policy. Also, always feel free to reach out to us. We are very willing to share our experiences, including what we did wrong. So please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. You did perfectly. We have 3 minutes to wrap up now, which is just the perfect amount of time. I've dropped a link in the chat for a learn.wiki course on addressing harassment online that I think it would be wonderful if you could check out. I would like to highlight and uplift Serene, because this was her first clinic for Let's Connect today. So if people would like to show with reactions their appreciation for Serene, the amazing job she did today, we could not have done it without her. And also a big thank you to Sandra for an absolutely excellent presentation that's given us so much to think about. If you have time, it would be wonderful if you could fill in our short exit survey on Menti. This helps us make sure that we're delivering clinics that are what you want, how you want them, and what was useful about them is always good to know for the speakers. I would just like to thank everyone for being here, to Cassie and Serene for helping to facilitate. And if you would all like to just show some appreciation for Sandra, this is the point where we can take our mics off and make some noise if we would like. So thank you all very much and for bearing with us as we went slightly over time. So yay!
Thank
And
you.
thanks, of course, to the translators as well. I forgot to thank them, but yay. I hope you all have wonderful days, evenings, mornings, and yeah, keep friendly and let us know what you think of how we got on today.